My name is Rachel Hale. I'm 29 and I run client relations at a small tech company in a Cleveland suburb. For years, my family told me I would never be successful. They said it like a joke at dinners, like a warning at holidays, and like an embarrassing secret when relatives visited. Those words cut because I worked nights, paid my own way through grad school, and took a promotion that let me move back to help Dad when his health got fragile. My father, Tom Hale, is 58, and he used to manage a small appliance shop before retirement. He is stubborn, blunt, and still calls me when a light bulb burns out. My mother, Claire, is 56, quiet and people-pleasing, quick to smooth things over. My sister Jenna is 32, polished, loud, and very good at smiling to other people. I told them I could balance my job and Dad's care, but they never took me seriously. Jenna would flick her eyes and say, "Rachel, you travel so much, you're not here." Mom would nod. They implied my promotions were just luck. What was at stake was more than pride. We were talking about Dad's house, his bank accounts, and his care. If people believed I was unreliable, I could lose legal access to decisions that would affect Dad's health and his savings. I had to prove I was capable and fast. I also had to figure out why Jenna had suddenly become so interested in Dad's paperwork. That question would lead to things I didn't expect. The tension hit a new level the night of a family meeting. Jenna arrived in a crisp suit, hair perfect, and an armful of forms. She announced that Dad had been forgetting bills and that she had arranged for a property review so we could all be on the same page. Mom beamed and said it sounded responsible. I had driven 30 minutes expecting to talk about medication refills. Instead, I was handed a proposed transfer of a small trust into Jenna's temporary care and a notarized-looking page that asked Dad to sign over power of attorney in case of future incapacity. I asked to read everything slowly. Jenna said quickly, "Don't worry, it's standard. Dad just needs someone local." Dad looked confused. He squinted at the pages and said, "What's this for, honey?" Jenna put on a soft voice and explained it like a favor. Mom started nodding, then said to me, "Rachel, you have so much on your plate. Don't stress." That line felt like a shove. I left that night with a heavy feeling and a folder. I spent the drive home going through dates and signatures. I called the lawyer who did Dad's will 5 years earlier and asked whether any new documents had been filed. There were none. I set up email alerts on Dad's accounts and asked the bank to notify me of any major changes. By the next morning, two unsettling things happened. A certified letter was returned to the post office marked claimed by Jenna, and the local handyman told me he'd been paid in cash by Jenna to replace a mailbox lock so mail could be rerouted. How could this be happening right under my nose? For weeks, I kept two lives running, my job and a quiet investigation at home. At work, I led pitches and mentored two junior account managers. At home, I became a detective. I printed bank statements, requested copies of certified mail logs from the post office, and saved every voicemail from Dad. I started a timeline in a notebook and labeled each entry date, who said what, and any witnesses. Jenna's pattern was obvious. She showed up right before important meetings, insisted on handling things, and then claimed I had agreed. She moved Dad's paperwork into a locked drawer at her house and told Mom that she would take care of the bills because she was close by. She also started telling neighbors that I was busy building my career and couldn't be relied on for day-to-day tasks. It felt like she was rewriting the story. I asked a neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, to keep an eye on Dad's mail and routines. She told me she had seen Jenna at the bank early one morning with a small envelope. I took notes and started collecting witness statements. I also found an odd detail. Jenna loved to photograph Dad with event flyers on the wall behind him, and in several photos, a calendar was visible with dates marked. I saved those photos. My stakes were real. Without legal standing, I could be excluded from medical choices and from Dad's savings. I couldn't let someone strong on smiles take those decisions for reasons I couldn't yet prove. I filed a formal complaint with the bank and scheduled a consult with an elder law attorney. I didn't know how far Jenna would go, but I knew I needed evidence, and fast. I tried talking to Dad plainly. I asked him about appointments and bills in simple sentences while we made coffee. Sometimes he answered correctly, sometimes he shrugged and said he didn't remember. Once he laughed and said he just wanted us to be happy together. Jenna used those small lapses to say, "See, he needs someone local." That phrase became her tool. Behind the care, Jenna started quietly shifting finances. I discovered charges for home repairs I hadn't authorized and a transfer labeled maintenance advance that went to a private account Jenna controlled. When I confronted her, she said it was for necessary updates and that she'd pay herself back. Mom accepted that explanation. A close friend from high school warned me not to underestimate Jenna's social networks. She'd always been good at convincing people she was charitable. My plan moved from asking to proving. I documented the transfers and asked the bank for copies of signature cards. The bank provided a list showing Jenna had set up a small access token for in-person withdrawals. I also found notarized forms that looked suspicious. Some dates on the notary stamps didn't match the timestamps on photos that showed Dad at community events. I began to suspect coordination. I had to decide whether to bring this to court. If I did, it would force a public airing of family business. If I held back, Jenna could finish whatever she intended. The next step felt huge, and I asked myself, could I win evidence while protecting Dad's dignity? The answer would mean taking risks I had tried to avoid. I didn't want to punish Jenna. I wanted to stop her and make sure Dad's decisions were protected. My lawyer recommended a limited guardianship hearing to set temporary checks while doctors evaluated Dad. That required medical records, witness statements, and clear timelines. I focused on the steps I could control. First, I gathered medical notes showing missed appointments and a physician's letter expressing concern about Dad's short-term memory. Second, I collected financial paperwork, bank withdrawals, receipts for repairs, and copies of certified mail logs. I asked neighbors to write what they'd seen and collected date-stamped photos from Jenna's social posts that contradicted her public claims. I also prepared a non-legal strategy. Jenna thrived on her image. She gave small speeches at community gatherings and wrote in the local newsletter about family devotion. If I could show a pattern behind the image, vanishing mail, rerouted checks, and inconsistent dates, her story of being the sole devoted daughter would weaken. I made a file that combined public posts with private records and kept it factual and dry. The hardest obstacle was Mom. She loved peace and avoided conflict. I had to explain to her that legal steps could be temporary and were about safety, not punishment. I gave her copies of the documents I had collected and promised to keep the process dignified. She cried and said she was scared. That moment made the stakes clearer. This could tear the family apart. If I was wrong, or if I was right. The week before the hearing, Jenna started a public charm offensive. She organized a fundraiser for the library and posted smiling photos with Dad. Neighbors called her a saint, and Mom kept remarking how proud she was. But I had saved those photos and noticed small details. A calendar visible behind Dad in one picture with dates crossed out. A local event flyer showing the day Jenna said she'd been elsewhere. Those tiny mismatches became proof when matched against appointment logs. I also found a helpful witness. Elena, a nurse at Dad's clinic, told me that she had seen Jenna rearrange appointment dates on the clinic's whiteboard and later tell staff that Dad's daughter would handle transportation. Elena agreed to write a sworn statement about the changes she observed and about Dad's confusion after long conversations. Another neighbor admitted they'd seen a handyman hand cash to Jenna for mail work. As I compiled testimonies, I rehearsed how to keep emotion out of the courtroom. My lawyer coached me on how to speak in short, factual sentences. We created a timeline with dates, photos, bank statements, and signed neighbor notes. I also prepared a brief explanation of what I wanted: temporary shared decision power, a medical assessment, and a neutral trustee for large transactions. On the morning of the hearing, I felt nerves, but I also felt ready. Everything hinged on the judge trusting the documents and the witnesses. If the record was convincing, Jenna would lose the easy steps she had been using. If it wasn't, she might tighten control even more. I walked into the courthouse with my folder and a small question in my pocket. Would the legal system see what I saw? Execution in court was methodical. I stood and spoke in a clear voice. I began with the facts: missed appointments, dates on the calendar photos, certified mail logs showing items claimed by Jenna, and bank withdrawals labeled in ways that didn't match normal expenses. The judge asked short questions about witnesses. Elena gave a calm, specific account of seeing appointment changes and how Dad looked confused after long conversations. Mrs. Alvarez described seeing Jenna at the bank with an envelope and signed a written statement. Jenna's lawyer tried to frame her as the caring daughter who stepped up, but when asked about the shadowed calendar and the handyman payment, Jenna's answer slipped. She offered explanations that sounded rehearsed and inconsistent with the documents. I had one more move. I showed a set of social posts Jenna had made praising herself for handling family duty, while the original appointment confirmations had different dates. The judge examined the timeline and asked the bank to freeze large transfers pending further review. The court ordered a temporary arrangement: shared decision-making for basic care, a medical evaluation, and a neutral trustee for big transactions. It wasn't a complete victory, but it created a legal barrier between Jenna and unilateral control. When the judge called for a break, Jenna glared at me with a face that had no smile. I felt relief, but also a heavy caution, because legal steps are only as strong as the next hearing. As we left the courthouse, Jenna mouthed something like a promise. The neighbors, who had been polite, now watched us closely. I knew the next phase would not be in courtrooms, but in how people treated Dad, and how Jenna reacted when stripped of the easy narrative she had built. The aftermath was quieter than I expected, but no less real. The temporary court order stayed while doctors completed a focused assessment of Dad's memory. The report suggested some short-term memory decline and recommended supervised decision-making for financial matters. The judge approved a temporary plan. I was added as a co-signatory on everyday bills, and a neutral trustee would review any large transfers. Jenna's public schedule slowed, and some neighbors pulled back after hearing testimony. Mom was upset and felt guilty for trusting Jenna. I sat with her, gave her copies of the documents, and promised the legal steps were about safety, not shame. Dad responded well to routines. He liked having pill bottles labeled and a clear calendar for appointments. That piece mattered more than appearances. Jenna called the court's move overreach, accused me of embarrassing her, and cut back on family visits. There were real consequences. The bank reversed a questionable cash payment and closed the temporary access Jenna had set up. The neutral trustee flagged transactions that lacked proper paperwork. Legally, no one lost their inheritance. We simply put checks in place so decisions would be shared and documented. Socially, some relationships changed. I felt sad at broken ties, but also steady knowing Dad was safer. The short lesson I carry is this: protect the person you love with calm facts, not anger. It is possible to stand up and still ask for dignity for everyone involved. In the end, Dad looked at me one afternoon and, with a small smile, said, "Thank you for staying." That moment made everything worth it.